we have to focus on intention. This entire process, paying off debt, and anyone who goes through the process of paying off debt, it teaches you something. It teaches you to be very intentional with your money and where it's going.
This show is dedicated to helping you strengthen your family tree and live financially free. Welcome to the Marriage, Kids, and Money podcast, everybody. This is Andy Hill, and today we're talking about how to pay off debt while still enjoying life. Yeah. Well, according to the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, Americans now owe around $1 trillion in credit card debt. This is the highest number since the New York Fed began tracking this information in 1999. As a country, we're buying more than we can afford, and it's showing. So how can we as a society rid ourselves of this high interest debt while still enjoying life? Can we plan for tomorrow and enjoy today? Well, to help us answer this very difficult question, I've invited author Allison Baggerly on the show today. Allison is a podcaster, a money coach, and the founder of Inspired Budget. As a former teacher, Allison blends her talents for teaching with her passion for personal finances to help others learn how to start budgeting and build a life they love. Her new book, Money Made Easy: How to Budget, Pay Off Debt, and Save Money, is out now. Welcome back to the show, Allison.
Oh, Andy, that was amazing. Thank you. I'm so excited to be here. I've been looking forward to this all week.
Oh, absolutely. Well, you and I have been connected for quite a while. If people have been listening to the show for a while, they remember you on the show in 2019,
Wow.
and we were friends even before
I
that.
know.
So I'm glad to connect with you again and have this important conversation that I think is going to help a lot of people, because this is a weird time that we're going through right now. And obviously, it's easy for me to put my judgment hat on and say, well, people should spend less than they make and pay off their debt with that extra money. But with inflation lately, it's been really tough for people just to get by. So how can we pay down our debt, our high interest debt, during these high inflationary times?
Yeah. I was reading an article the other day, and I don't remember the exact stat, so I'm not going to make one up, but I was reading it, and it was some sort of stat, some sort of percentage that people are relying on credit cards just for their very basic needs: groceries, gas, electricity, things like that. So I'm a very much, like, me, Andy, I'm a half glass full kind of person. I'm a let's look at the silver lining type person. You and I are very alike in that way. So I like to think that it's not that people are like excited to go into debt and they're necessarily buying things that they don't need. It's that, like you said, everything is costing more. And so you might not be making as much money and your money's not going as far. And so people are using that credit card as a crutch. And the truth, when you sent me over these questions in advance, and it was, your question was, how can we pay down our debt during these high inflationary times? And the truth, if I'm being 100% honest, is you might not make the same amount of progress as before. Your money doesn't go as far right now, but it doesn't mean you can't make any progress. It doesn't mean that you have to go backwards. You just might not make as much progress. Your speed might change a little bit. Paying off debt is never this straight line. It always seems like it's this roller coaster because life happens and some of it's just completely out of our control, like inflation. So I would say when it comes to paying off debt right now, if you're struggling with money, is to really focus on your priorities in terms of your spending and seeing your debt payment as a non-negotiable in your life, treating it like it's your rent payment or your electricity payment, and then asking yourself, is there anything I can find extra to put towards this high interest debt? Because those credit card interest rates, they're soul sucking and it keeps you in this cycle of debt. So the sooner you can get out of that, the more money you have every month to keep for yourself.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. I think that sometimes we see articles online where somebody paid off $1 billion of debt in 5 minutes, and you feel like, well,
Yeah.
how come I can't do that? And I joke about that. I'm even a curator of stories like that as well. So
Yep.
it's kind of hyperbolic, but I think maybe in the past times, maybe things like that were easier, like you're saying, and now it's getting a bit harder with this inflation and with credit card, with the Fed increasing interest rates, credit card interest rates are going up. So it just gets harder and harder, right?
Yeah, it really does. And I think that it can be really easy and normal to get stuck in this cycle of thinking, I'm not going to get out. This is my new normal. And that's what we need to change. That's what, if you're listening and you have debt, where you are right now with credit cards does not need to be your new normal. We are experiencing these super high interest rates, but history and past and the patterns have told us that it's not going to stay like this. It will go down eventually, but there is hope for you. You just have to look at it in a different light and really create a plan. And that is, I think, the hardest thing, because we can get so stuck in our emotions and our overwhelm that creating a plan either feels impossible or every plan feels like it's destined to fail. But it's not. That's just our fear and our frustration speaking.
Got it. Well, after we've taken some time to give ourselves some grace and realize that this is a
Mhm.
crazy, crazy moment in the world, really, right now, what are some of those small steps that we can do to maybe find that gap between our income and our expenses, or grow that gap? Let's talk food first. I know that you're always posting some
Okay.
really funny things on Instagram about food. What ways can we save, knowing that that's one of the areas that's been going up a lot lately?
Oh my gosh, yes. And when we say interest rate is at, whatever percent, like 6%, 7%, food has always been higher. That's just an average. So food, groceries, restaurants, it's actually higher than really like those headlines. So number one, if you're spending more money on food, it's not because you're doing a bad job at grocery shopping. I know that for our family, we had to increase our grocery budget and we came to terms with that. So when it comes to saving money on food, I'm going to say make sure that you are being very intentional in terms of saving money anywhere. It all comes back to intentions. I think we've all bought that bag of salad that sits in the drawer and then we end up tossing out. I know I'm guilty of that. So I have made sure during this time to be very intentional about what I'm eating and I'm making. So I will shop fruits and vegetables that are in season. You're not going to see me buying strawberries in December because they're incredibly expensive. I will make sure that I'm meal planning every single meal that we eat. And yes, we do go out to eat. This isn't like we're only eating at home. I don't like cooking, so I keep everything very easy, very simple, and I always have a plan. And I have found that when I have a plan before I go into the grocery store, I'm less likely to become distracted by all the options and add things to my cart without thinking, because those prices really do add up. So I would say go in with a plan, make a meal plan, and then also realize that you're really not going to be able to pay the same amount that you had last year or 2 years ago or 3 years ago. And that's okay, but you can still control the prices that you're paying now by going in with intention.
Yeah, I love the meal plan idea, because
Yes.
not only does it help you probably save a little bit of money on groceries, but it also saves you from just, ordering out when you're like, okay, the
Yes.
day is ended, we both got back from
Mhm.
work, the kids are home from school. Oh my God, I don't know, let's just order out, right? And that's where the,
Yeah.
the costs come in, and probably the health factor as well when you're eating out a
Yes.
lot. So
Yes, and I will say I am guilty of literally doing that yesterday. So even though we make
exactly.
a meal plan, we did that yesterday, but if we didn't have a meal plan, it would be way more. It's okay for that to happen every now and then. I think that it's totally unreasonable for us to assume that we're going to be perfect every single time. But if I can get it right 80% of the time, I'm going to save money and I'm going to get closer to my goals. And that's kind of the mindset that I have when it comes to saving money on food, paying off debt, and just managing your money in general.
Yeah, taking these small incremental steps can really make a difference.
Mhm.
Let's say, somebody's listening and they realize, hey, man, I've been looking at the numbers. I don't know how much more I can save at this point. Let's talk about
Mhm.
making some more money. Now, this
Yes.
podcast is for parents. You know that. You're a parent, you've got kids. There's a reality of the making extra money that is different for us parents. Talk to the parents out there that want to make a little bit of more money, but realize the limits of the side hustle or whatever, that based
Mhm.
on your responsibilities as a parent.
Absolutely. I don't want to take more on my plate in terms of time away from my family. I get that. When we were paying off debt, we did have some side hustles, but I was very mindful about it really taking time away from my kids, because that was just something that was a non-negotiable for me. So I very much, first off, go to your current job where you work now. If you haven't had a raise in a while, ask for a raise. Ask for maybe even overtime. Maybe you go in earlier, you stay late. If that's not an option, then maybe you look for a different job in a company that pays more. This is something that my husband and I did. As teachers, we are really set at a salary level. Well, not every district pays the same amount. So there was a time whenever we switched districts to make $10,000 more each. And that money has a really big impact, and it had a really big impact on our debt-free journey. So by doing that, we weren't spending more time at our job. We were just choosing our job wisely. So there are those options. And then of course, I don't know about you, but I love how many work at home options are available now that we're just like this very digital society. And I would say that there is a skill set you have that someone else is looking for and needs support in. For me, I have someone that works for me. She works about 10 hours a week at home on her own time, answering emails and helping me out on Instagram. It is a skill set she has. She's actually a teacher. She can communicate effectively, kindly, and it just alleviates a pain point in my business so that I can spend my time doing something else and maybe creating something. So there is some sort of skill set you have, even if you think that you don't, I promise you do, that you can actually see. Is there anyone that is missing this skill set and that needs me to step in for them, even if it's just 2 hours a day? Because she makes on average about $850 to $1,000 extra each month by just working about 2 hours a day for me.
That's incredible. Yeah, I mean, the opportunities that are out there, especially when you have maybe that restriction of, hey, so I need to be in this house with my kids while earning
Exactly.
money. I think there's so many opportunities, like you said, a virtual assistant, admin work, proofreading, freelance writing, things like that can be a big deal and make you
Yes.
quite a bit of money. Let's talk to the parents out there, the spouses out there that are saying, I am down for controlling my spending. I am down for making a little bit more money, but I can't seem to get my spouse to be interested in this conversation.
Mm.
And they just say, "Hey, everything's gonna be fine." Well, what would you say to that individual? How do you engage in that conversation? How do you move the needle in your financial
Mhm.
relationship with your spouse?
I would say number one, you're not alone. You might feel alone and feel like you're the only person that has a spouse that's not on board, but this is so normal, more common than maybe you even realize. I see it a lot in my membership. I see what we could accomplish, but my other half, my partner, doesn't care and I can't control them. They're an adult. And what I always say to that is number one, don't lose faith. There is always an opportunity for change. And then number two, I think that actions can speak so much louder than words. Here's an example. One of my students, she was on board. She wanted to have a budget. She wanted to pay off debt. She saw that she really wanted just security and peace of mind with her money. So she joined our membership. She started just the process. And instead of nagging her husband, which is probably what I would do, if I'm honest, and it's really like the default, right? Like,
Yeah.
I see this. Why don't you notice it? Look at what we can do. Instead of doing that, because she knew it didn't work, she had done it in the past, she started showing him what she was doing in very simple ways. For example, she would print off a calendar and she put all of their bills on it and how much it was. And then she would write if it was on auto draft or if she paid it, and she would literally just check it off. Or she would put maybe a budget. Maybe it wasn't a full budget breakdown. Maybe it was just a budget for their grocery spending or a budget for restaurants or a budget for their debts and how much extra she wanted to send to debt. She would put that on the refrigerator, and he started seeing it, not because she was pointing it out, but because he could see the change in her and he could see, hey, she's doing something and I want to see what this is. And he got on board with it because it had to come to it almost like on his own. And he had to see some of the change to be, I guess, convinced that this is worth the effort and the sacrifice for a season of time to live abundantly for the rest of our lives.
I love that. Lead by
Yeah.
example. And especially from a relationship standpoint, your financial confidence, maybe that becomes attractive to your spouse being like, well,
Yes.
I want to be around that. I want to be around that magnetism, what's going on there. I think that's really cool. And you lead by example and get them going. That's great.
Exactly.
That's a great example. And that is great advice. Now, let's talk to the person who's listening. They're like, okay, I'm saving a little bit of money. Maybe I'm making a little bit more money now. I got my spouse interested or on board. Let's talk about paying down this debt. Now, we've got a gap between our income and our expenses.
Mhm.
What strategies can we use to pay this down in a good way where we're seeing some progress and keeping ourselves motivated?
You know me. I love paying down debt. I love talking about debt. I think it's so wonderful.
That's
I
why
think
I
it can
invited
be
you.
very I know, but I'm thinking, the way I paid off my debt is we went through the debt snowball method, meaning that we paid down our smallest balances first. And there was a reason for that. Number 1, we had to free up money every month to cover daycare expenses. I was pregnant at the time. We didn't have $900 a month. I can't believe daycare used to only be $900 a month. It was $900 a month. We had to free that up. So the debt snowball gave us very quick access to cash flow. However, we also didn't have high interest debt. We did not carry credit card balances. In fact, Andy, I couldn't even get a credit card. I could not qualify for a credit card. So I didn't even have the ability to carry a credit card at the time because it was like 2011. I didn't have any history with any sort of finances. No one was approving me for a credit card, which in hindsight is probably a very good thing because I'm a spender. Regardless, I followed the debt snowball method because we didn't have that high interest debt and we had a very unique need for our family. And keyword there is unique. Personal finance is just that. It's very personal. We have to do what works for our family, not necessarily what works for someone else. For those that are struggling with this crazy high interest credit card debt that feels like it's just going to continue to go up, and when is it going to end? You can see the power and frustration and negative impact that interest rate can have in your life. So I love the idea of focusing on the high interest debt first so that you can really knock it out and keep more of your money and get out of debt faster. So regardless of what you choose to do, I think the best thing to do is to have a plan.
Yeah.
Have a plan and stick with it. Even when you don't want to, even when it's hard, even when you have to pause. Just because you pause your plan doesn't mean you're not seeing it through. But going back and waffling between one plan to another, you're going to lose that focus. So get a plan, stick to it, choose the debt that you want to tackle first, and take any extra money that you can find and put it towards that debt within reason, of course.
Yeah, I think that's great. Having a methodology and obviously making sure that it fits for your personal family
Mhm.
situation is smart advice. Let's talk about staying motivated because sometimes this process can take a long time. And actually, if you're not you're not trying to hurt yourself and try to do it in a few months or whatever, it can take a while. So talk about staying motivated, maybe ways that you stayed motivated during your process.
We took 4.5 years to pay off our debt. Andy, when I tell you, and our goal was 5 years. So we even kind of beat our goal a little bit. When I tell you that I lost motivation, I feel like it happened so much because that's a really long time to feel like you were working on anything. I mean, that's having a baby and it's off to kindergarten. Really, I mean, if you think about
Yeah,
it, it
that's
was
true.
so lengthy and long. And there were times that I was super excited and ready to go. Absolutely. But there were also times, specifically seasons in my life, I think summer, like every summer, I wanted to give up. Around Christmas, I would want to give up. I could see those patterns. I needed some sort of extra motivation. I was ready to give up. And so during that time, I did 3 things to help me with my motivation. The first thing was I turned to someone for accountability, particularly my husband. Now, my husband did not struggle with motivation as much as I did. He was very focused and determined. So I could go to him, express my overwhelm, my frustration, my lack of motivation, and he could kind of give me a pep talk and remind me of what we were doing in a very kind and gentle way, not in an, disrespectful way. So that's the very first thing I would always do is I would turn to him. The second thing I would do is I would turn to content. So at the time, I would actually binge listen to Farnoosh Torabi's podcast, So Money, because I just needed content. I needed to be reading, hearing, listening to content that was promoting something I was working toward. It got me excited. I was not consuming content of people taking all these trips and doing all the things, I was very mindful about what I was allowing into my mind. And then the third thing I would do is I would save my debt payoff tracker for the moments I was losing motivation. I had this thermometer that I had printed out on Microsoft Word that said debt free, and I would only color it in when I had lost motivation. So months would go by, and the moment I was like, what am I doing? This is so frustrating. I want to have the nice house. I want to have all these things. Why can I not have this? I'm a college educated person. I deserve to keep all my money. That's when I would get my red Sharpie, go to my closet door where I kept it, and I would color it in. And seeing how much I could shade in gave me motivation.
I love that. Those are really true psychological
Mhm.
ways to make this possible. I think I'll say myself, sometimes I focus too much on the numbers and
Mhm.
all of the details to get there, but there is so much to money that is emotional and psychological that we need to remind ourselves of that we're humans. This is not a robotic opportunity. These things take a while, and whatever we need to do to get there, put those positive messages
Yeah.
in our face, in our ears, is a smart move to do. Talk about the things that we can do to not backslide and get back into debt once we've completed this, or once we've moved forward
Mhm.
and accomplished a big deal. How do we avoid it in the future?
I think that there's going to be times when you might go back into debt. I would love to say that you'll never go into debt again, but there could be a really massive, unexpected medical emergency that happens, and you're forced to pay a $35,000 medical bill, and you don't have $35,000. And so you go into debt to set up that payment plan. So, first off, I think releasing that pressure to be perfect forever is very freeing. Number one. Now, am I saying like, oh, now's the time to go and get credit cards and buy everything you want? Absolutely not. I'm not saying to go finance vacations, but I have freed myself of perfection. And instead, I think that we have to focus on intention. This entire process, paying off debt, and anyone who goes through the process of paying off debt, it teaches you something. It teaches you to be very intentional with your money and where it's going. It teaches you to be patient, and it teaches you to really prioritize what's important to you. So when you can do those things, when you can have patience, be intentional, and know your priorities, the moment that you're tempted to go into debt for an item, you can pause, take that, think about it, reflect on it, have a little bit of a pep talk. It will be easier to say no to something that maybe in the past you would have said yes to.
Oh, I love it. I love it. This is great. There's somebody listening right now and they're thinking, you know what? I don't know, man. Life is for living. You got
Mhm.
money, you should enjoy it. All this budgeting and paying off debt and saving money, that's boring. What would you say to that person?
I would say that it might be boring, but it's so freeing. And I know that's probably not what you were expecting to hear. There are boring things in life. It's boring to have to go get go to your dentist appointment every 6 months. It's boring to have to go to your doctor's checkup, but it is so freeing to do that. And to that, I say your budget is really just a plan for your money. I love it because I particularly love spending money on experiences with my kids. Actually, in 2 weeks, I'm surprising my son with a trip to Universal Studios. I'm going to pick him up from school and we're going to head straight to the airport. I looked forward to adding that to our budget. So when I can say that my budget is really just a way for me to be very intentional to spend money on what I want most, it's no longer boring and a chore to me. And it's very exciting because it allows me to see that I can do the things that I love and are meaningful for me while also saving for retirement, while also setting aside money for, my HOA dues, which I would rather not pay, but I have to. So that's the way that I see budgeting. And I think that you can live an amazing life on a budget. You just have to be intentional and know what brings you joy with your money. Know what brings you joy with your spending.
I love it. Yeah. Spending and planning with intentionality for
Mhm.
the values that are most important in your life. I mean,
Exactly.
I'm excited for you and your son to go on that big
I'm so
adventure. That's
excited
really what
too.
budgeting and planning is
I know.
for.
I'm so
So
excited. I can't wait.
Well, somebody's listening and they're motivated to pay down their debt and make a plan for their money like you have and like you've outlined in this book. We're going to talk about it in a moment.
Mhm.
What is one small step, one small incremental step they can take to get them in the right direction?
I would say know your financial truth. And for me, that looks like knowing where your money is going, how much money you have coming in, how much money you have going out, and how much debt you have. I think that there is so much power in knowledge. And so often we are scared because we don't actually know anything about our money or our spending habits. So I would say sit down, print out your last month's bank statements, or just go online, go on your app on your phone, and just look at your spending, look at your money, find patterns in it so that you can make decisions that you're eager to make and that you're excited to make and that aren't a headache or a chore or a pain because you know your numbers, you've faced your financial truth. And once you're able to do that and you know exactly how much money you have going out, how much money you have going in, you can make a realistic plan to pay off debt and send extra money to debt.
I love it. This is great advice, Allison. And I know you have a lot more advice for us in your new book, Money Made Easy. Where can they find this book? And then also, where can they listen to your awesome podcast?
Oh, yes. So you can get the book on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, pretty much wherever books are sold. It's so wonderful. It's really just about, I think personal finance is personal and it's about informing you of your options so that way you can choose the best plan for you when it comes to your money. And it's wrapped up in stories, which I think it makes reading something like nonfiction much more enjoyable. And then you can go check out my podcast, Inspire Budget Podcast, anywhere where you're listening to this podcast.
Awesome. Yeah, I do like that about Allison's book. And I like that about a lot of books that weave in real people stories. So you can take down that knowledge, but then also put it into a real example. I like books like that. I like Allison's book. Allison, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Andy.